Going on, Sixers fans? Welcome back into another edition of Trust the Podcast. I am your host, Joe Tuman. As always, the NBA season is coming to its close. At least the regular season's coming to its close. The Sixers currently in a three-way battle for that number one seed in the Eastern Conference. They've fallen behind a little bit because Embiid and Harden have missed a few games, but as the closing stretch nears its conclusion, the hope for the Sixers is that they're going to finish on a strong note. And to discuss the Sixers' recent affairs as well as their upcoming games, I'm joined by the Daily Collegian's own Jim Hartnett, my men's hockey and former softball beat partner. Jim, thank you for joining me today. You know, we're coming off a busy weekend up in Allentown covering hockey, but once again, you're joining me today to talk some basketball. How are you doing, Jim?
Good, Joe. Definitely coming off a busy weekend, like you said, but I'm just happy to be here and glad you invited me on to talk some Sixers hoops and some big matchups coming up with the Celtics and Bucks. So,
yeah, absolutely. There is, like you just said, there's some big matchups coming up. We got a road game against the Bucks on April 2nd, this Sunday, and then we host the Celtics on Tuesday at 8 p.m. But tonight's the Mavericks. Then we got the Raptors before those two big games. But I'm assuming that they're going to use these next two games to kind of, if there's anyone who's injured, anyone who's banged up, whether it be Harden, Embiid, McDaniels, I assume they're going to try and get those guys right. If they're not ready to play, they're not going to play in those two games. They're going to be geared up for these huge games coming up. So, Jim, just before we get into some of the specifics here, you know, Harden's still questionable. He's missed a few games. Just what are your thoughts on the Sixers at this point in the season? Have you been impressed and happy with their play? And are you confident coming into these two huge games over the next week?
I've been really satisfied with how the season's turned out so far. To be honest, I wouldn't have expected them to be in a position right now at the start of the season where they're contending for that number one seed. I thought it would have been a two-headed monster at the top with Milwaukee and Boston, but, you know, they had great starts to the season, but they've started kind of to flatline a little bit and started to come down to earth. And as a result, the Sixers have taken advantage of that to rattle off some wins, big games from Embiid, you know, despite having a couple of injuries here and there from, you know, Maxey earlier in the season. Embiid had his time. Harden's now on another stint on the injured list. So the Sixers haven't had an easy way, but to say that they're in a position to possibly, if they can win both games, be in a spot to have the number one seed going into the playoffs, I think that's a really good thing, and I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think at this point in the year, I'm very happy with this team. I spoke about this last week when I had Chris Reynolds on as well. Just the Sixers, to me, have solidified themselves as true contenders for that championship. I think any of these teams that if they win the East, should be the favorite in an NBA Finals matchup. Now, to your point, you know, the one seed, we do want it, but because of this last week where we had some tough losses, Harden was out, and Embiid missed the Denver game, we have fallen slightly behind. The Bucks are now 5 games ahead of us, 54 wins. We're sitting at 49-26 on the year. But all three of these teams are still playing very well, over 500 in their last 10 games. Boston's 2.5 games ahead of us, but like you said, if we take them down, at least one of these teams, but if we get it done against both of them, that's going to be huge to get the Sixers right back in the race for that top seed. At 49-26, it's not like I'm not concerned about the record whatsoever, but for me, you tell me if you agree. I'm not like going to be that upset if the Bucks get the 1 seed, but I would really like to get back to that number 2 seed. I really thought a week ago that's where this Sixers team was headed, but obviously with Harden missing some time, with some tough losses on the road against Phoenix and Golden State, and then as well against Denver the other night, although that was without Embiid. You know, the water's been muddied a little bit, but do you think the Sixers can get back up to that number 2 seed?
Yeah, I think there's like a handful of games left, maybe like 5, 6, or 7 games. I wasn't
7
too
games.
sure.
I was just
7.
about to check 7.
So there's 7 games left, and 2 of them are against Milwaukee and Boston, 1 each. And then they play tonight against Dallas. You know, that's another tough game with Luka and Kyrie. So they play tough games. But, you know, if you manage to find a way to win all 7 games, and Milwaukee and Boston play each other, depending on how that turns out, Sixers legitimately could be in a situation where they're at a solid point to get that number 2 seed. It's looking destined that regardless of what happens, it's bound to be a Boston-Philadelphia matchup in the semifinals. With the way that Boston's been trending the last couple of weeks, Um, you know, Washington put up 130 points on them the other night.
Yup.
I mean, I think Tuesday the 4th will be a interesting test to see what the semifinals are out of be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Sixers beat the Celtics last time we played them. Celtics took the first two matchup of the season, including on opening night. They also beat us when I had Zach Allen on the podcast, so he got to rub that in my face. But hopefully this time, with the action being in Wells Fargo, the Sixers will get the job done. You said, if the Sixers just win these last 7 games, people might laugh at that notion, but I mean, really, the only toss-ups in my mind, as long as we play all our best players, would be the Bucks and Celtics games, of course, because tonight I expect at least one of Embiid or Harden to play. I think Embiid will play tonight. If he doesn't, then maybe Dallas takes us down. But Maxi's been playing terrifically. He's ever since come back in the starting lineup about a month and a half ago. He's been amazing. He was amazing against Denver the other night. I don't know. I still think the way Dallas is playing right now, we could beat them because they've been so bad on defense for the past month. And then down the stretch, I mean, Miami, Atlanta, Brooklyn, these are solid teams in the East. But I think if our priority is going to be getting that 2 seed, if that isn't secured yet, I think Embiid and Harden will be playing in those games and we'll be able to take those 3 opponents down. Because, I mean, I have a lot of respect for especially Brooklyn and Miami right now, but I'm not too concerned that if the Sixers are playing to get a playoff seed they really want, I think we'll be determined and we'll be able to take those teams down. So, yeah, it really does come down to these final 2 games against the Bucks and the Celtics. Now, James Harden, he hasn't played since the Chicago game on March 20th, and his return to the lineup will be essential if we're going to win these big games down the stretch. He's dealing with the injury, and the last 2 games he did play in, he did seem held back by that injury because he had very inefficient shooting nights. Do you think are you concerned for him just because he's had so many injuries over the past few years? Are you concerned that we could be seeing him go back to maybe the level he was playing at in the playoffs last year? Or do you trust that the play he's had on the court this season will hold up once he returns to the lineup? Are you confident in him to continue to play as well as he has all year?
Yeah, I definitely do think so. He's proven he's been able to play well and consistent all year. He's had games, he's averaging over 10 assists. He's had games where he's popped off 30 points. Like, he's shown he can be vintage James Harden. Now, can he do that on a nightly basis? I don't think so. But they have to figure out a momentum swing together as a team to be able to build it for Harden. But I think despite him being injured throughout the season and now being injured with this Achilles, I think it's more of a precautionary thing right now. And because of the position the Sixers have put themselves in to be guaranteed that top 4, even possibly like top 3.
Yeah.
There's no reason to hurt your best players when you want them to perform at their highest in the playoffs. So he's definitely shown he can do that this season. He just needs to be healthy. And so they're resting him now to do that.
Harden proved in those 2 games where he was kind of playing through the injury before they decided to rest him over the past week. He proved he can still impact the game even if his shots aren't falling. He was still the masterful creator he's been all year in those games. You mentioned that you don't think Harden can necessarily be like this nuclear scorer every night, and I agree. Which is why it's so awesome to see what Maxi's been doing lately, because he had a similar run in November and December before he got injured, where he was just looking super comfortable scoring. His last 5 or 6 games, he's had 29, 37, 21, 21 again, 22, 31 points against the Pacers. He's been scorching hot over these past 2 weeks. To me, if he is this comfortable scoring once again, both driving to the lane, shooting from 3, I've seen it all from him in my eyes. With Harden by his side, whether Harden's scoring or whether he's just creating for Maxey, giving him the open looks or the strong looks he needs, I think our backcourt is, when healthy, like a top 3, maybe even in the entire league when they're playing like this. People will say that the height and the defensive liabilities of our backcourt might hold us back, but if they're playing this well on offense, I think we can hold our own against Boston, Milwaukee. Do you think that, with Maxey's current hot streak, does that give you even more confidence in this team going into the playoffs? Because we beat Milwaukee when they were both playing so well in that game.
Yeah, I just think they need to be able to continue striking while the iron's hot. And honestly, they just can't let off the pedal now when it means the most. And so if Maxey can find a way to still contribute and get his touches while Harden comes back, where does he excel the most? And you're going to have to see if he can do that while James Harden is also on the court. So it'll be interesting to see. But I don't think you want to disrupt what Maxi's doing, because no matter what, James Harden is going to do what he's going to do. He's going to facilitate. He's going to get his assist, and he's still going to get his points. But the way that Maxi's been playing, it's like, why not go to your best guy when they're playing their best?
Yeah, I definitely agree, because when Maxi's this hot, like we only have so many, shots to go around. We know Embiid, we're barely talking about him right now because it's at this point in the season, it's not even a question. He's playing like just the best basketball he's ever played. So we don't even need to question his role, but it comes down to like who is going to, if we need a big shot from one of our guards, which guard is going to wind up being the guy in the playoffs. Now, maybe it changes game to game, but in terms of a chemistry thing, there does need to be a balance. I do trust Harden at this point, that if Harden's like, tonight's my night, I think he's going to make the decision that he's going to be the guy taking those shots. But I think Harden has proven himself as a teammate and as a passer, that I think if Maxi's got 32 points and if we got a minute left in the game, close one against Boston or Milwaukee, I think Harden will give Maxi those looks. I think he's proven himself as a leader on this team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's shown throughout the season that it's that chemistry you're talking about. They have to find that chemistry to be able to continue to kind of excel off each other. So if Embiid's not open in the post, or if he's not, getting his move out at the 3-point line, I don't know, whatever it is, Harden's open or Maxi's open. So that trio could be double teamed at any point in time, specifically Embiid. But, there's always going to be somebody open. They have to find that hot hand. And I definitely agree with your sentiment that if Maxi's riding a 32-point game and it's a minute left in the fourth quarter, I do trust James Harden to give Maxi the ball and, look for that shot, because it was kind of something that like Ben Simmons did with Jimmy Butler when the Sixers were in 2019 or 2020, whatever year that was. But I trust him, but
some rare Ben Simmons praise.
Some rare Ben Simmons.
That hasn't happened in maybe ever since the creation of this podcast. So shout out to Jim Hartnett for being a trailblazer here on Trust the Podcast. But
I'm trying to be positive towards the Ben Simmons movement. I'm trying to be understanding of his problems, but
Hey, he was.
Why would Sixers fans be mad at Ben Simmons at this point when we've gotten James Harden?
We got James Harden. That's a great point, Jim.
And everything that's happened to the Nets has been completely down, and they've gotten rid of Kevin Durant, they've gotten rid of Kyrie Irving. Ben Simmons is out for the year. They have no draft picks. Like, what are we doing? So
this is such a great point, and I was not expecting to talk about this, but this is the great thing about having you on, Jim, because you're a smart guy. This is a great point. Ben Simmons not only brought James Harden to the Sixers, but he also, as you just said, like he literally deleted one of the Eastern Conference contenders. We don't have to deal with the Nets anymore. This is a great point, and I don't know why I never thought of it like.
We infiltrated the Nets and made them explode. Like whether it was Kyrie and like his anti-Semitism earlier in the season, or just Kevin Durant wanting to request a trade when Ben Simmons was there in the first place, whatever it may have been, Ben Simmons resulted in them completely and utterly awful debacle. And we got James Harden out of it. So yes, it's funny to like mock off of it, like, oh, Ben Simmons this, Ben Simmons that. But like at the end of the day, how can you be mad at Ben Simmons when we have James Harden now in a better position now than we were when we had him?
That's fair. I mean, I think people are mad at Ben Simmons because he cost us a trip.
True. But I remember watching that game vividly and was like, it's never going to change. It'll never change.
Yeah.
So gladly he's in a different state.
Yeah. Well, speaking of never changing, so we can switch topics. Just going into the playoffs, the thing about this Eastern Conference, as we said, like these top three teams, and Cleveland fans might want to throw Cleveland in there as well. They were giving me grief on TikTok because I didn't group them in with the top contenders when they're only a win behind us. That's fair, but like at the same time, I just don't buy them as contenders.
How can you put them in the same scenario when for the last 2 weeks we haven't had a full healthy squad? Like, if we've had a full healthy squad, it would probably be like a 4 or 5 game differential at this point. Like,
yeah, no, I agree with you. But with that aside, just coming into this playoff run, the thing is, these three teams all in this conference, that means one of those three teams has to go out in round 2. And then, the prevailing fear is like the Sixers always lose in round 2. And Could it happen again this year because these two other teams are so good? They're also finals contenders. A second round loss, while it wouldn't be like technically as embarrassing as, losing to Atlanta or losing to Miami in round 2, it's a lot more excusable. At the same time, nobody wants to see that again. So is there any like prevailing like anxiety from like as a fan for you in that sense? Or are you like just so confident that this is the year that they at least break through to the next round?
Joe, this is how I can compare it to for your Packers fandomship. It's like when the Packers used to go 13-3
Yeah.
and would always lose.
Yep.
What happens? Like what is happening there?
Right.
So that's kind of how it feels like. It's always like, the second round is like the Sixers' worst enemy.
Mhm.
And like, it's true. Like, we've been matched up with a couple of, good teams in the second round. The Hawks one year when they were shooting lights out, like that was a good team.
Yeah.
But then again, the Sixers were the better team on paper,
Yep.
and they should have won that game or
Right.
won that series.
Mhm.
But looking for this season, though, like you said, the let's say the 4 best teams in the NBA are out of the Eastern Conference, and that's a fair testament. You could definitely the 3, but you could group Cleveland in there, and regardless of who it ends up getting matched up with, if it's specifically either Boston or Milwaukee in the second round, and the Sixers take it all the way to 7 games, and it's a really tight, close 7 game, kind of like Toronto was, I don't see how you could get rid of Doc Rivers, or how you could, implode the team. It would honestly just be a situation where you need to get better building pieces or a better bench, or like we're rocking Dwayne Dedman off as our backup 5.
Well, I'm confident. Like, so you mentioned Doc. Like, I honestly was pretty not critical of Doc over the past month. Then he started Dedman against Denver the other night. But to Doc's credit, he only played him 10 minutes. Paul Reed wound up still playing a lot more minutes, having a good game. So I think Doc's going to continue to roll with Paul Reed to back up Joel. It just made no sense to start Dedman in that game, though. But I'm assuming Paul Reed is
Hopefully
still the backup 5. I'm hoping, because he's been good. Paul Reed's been very good over the past
absolutely
month. So I'm a little concerned about that. But yeah, if this goes to a game 7 against the Bucks, and then the Bucks win the finals, assuming we don't beat them, like, we can't fire Doc. I agree with you in the sense that I don't think it would happen. I just wish that weren't the case. The players seem to like Doc, though, which is why, I'm almost starting, just because we've been so good for the past 3 months, I'm not starting to become a Doc defender, but I've been trying not to just overly criticize him, because I can't be rooting against the Sixers. Because if I'm rooting against Doc Rivers, I'm rooting against the Sixers' success. You can't be doing that. So it's just a weird dynamic, wouldn't you say?
Definitely is. But then again, there's 2 best case scenarios for the Sixers. They lose in the first round, they fire Doc Rivers.
Yeah.
Or they make it to the conference finals, possibly make it to the finals and even win it.
Yeah.
Those are your best case scenarios. Your worst case scenario is that they make the second round and they lose in, honorable fashion. And you're like, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
But time and time again, Doc Rivers has kind of shown, and I don't know if this is a Sixers thing, but it's also been a thing when he was with the Clippers. And I mean, he won one with Boston, but he's proven his track record. He can't show up in big games. So I don't know if that's just like a personal thing in him, that he kind of just folds under pressure. But no, there's been certain situations where you're just like, man, I don't know if I'm not an NBA coach, but I don't know if I would have done that.
It's weird to say that Doc, at this point, because I've criticized him so much, it's weird to say that he could be the best coach in a playoff series against one of our fellow contenders. But the thing about Boston is, with Missoula, a lot of Celtics fans, not that he's been awful, because they've still been really good, but a lot of Celtics fans, the dialogue is he's not Brad Stevens, he's not Ime. So there is a world where the Sixers have a coaching advantage against a fellow contender in this Eastern Conference matchup. And that's really weird to say, but Doc, like you said, I mean, he has been a coach for 30 years. I try not to, once again, I try not to be like, well, he's been around forever, so he's good. Obviously, I've said many times how I feel about him, but it's weird to say that Doc Rivers could be an advantage against the Celtics in a playoff series.
Honestly, I'm thinking of it now because you bring up a great point. Joe Mazzulla is a first-year coach, and he's
and a very inexperienced coach.
He's never had that big game experience.
Yeah.
And so if the Sixers end up finding a way to get matched up with Boston in that second round, and God forbid they lose and Joe Mazzulla out coaches Doc Rivers like vividly, it's
Yeah.
on paper that he out coaches him.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, Doc.
Yeah.
I don't know who we get, but bye, Doc. It's just
it can't happen.
It can't happen because if you let Jason Tatum take over the game and beat you, like that's a different story. Like, oh man, we could have had him too. Like, oh, you're yada yada yada, whatever. But to let possibly Joe Mazzulla outcoach Doc Rivers in the second round and just proving the point that he can't be there in big games.
Right.
Sixers might have a new head coach.
Right. I agree. The thing about Doc is that he's had in against Atlanta, it was Ben. Last year it was Embiid was hurt. So he's had the excuses in Philadelphia. I'm hoping that we just break through. And I think we can. I think Embiid and Harden and Maxey have that in them. I think we have some really good role players too. Like the bench still struggled against Golden State and Phoenix this past weekend, but that was also because with Harden being out, Melton wasn't coming off the bench. He was starting. McDaniels was hurt. So we were missing some bench guys. I do think that we have the makings of a championship rotation in the playoffs. I'm almost more worried about our other two starters in Tucker and Harris because they're very up and down. And it's just, to your point about Doc, is like if McDaniels is outplaying Tucker or outplaying Tobias, if we need to go to Melton for a 3-guard lineup, will Doc make the adjustment mid-game or will he stick to his guns? More cases than not, he usually sticks to his guns.
Absolutely. He tends to stick to his game plan and hopes that it works out in the long run. And by the time that he realizes like, oh crap, this isn't working out, and he tries to change up his game plan, and it shows that the Sixers are mounting a comeback, it's too late. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. Like you said, if one of the bench players is outplaying Tobias or PJ, who says to not put them in the starting lineup for the next game or give them more minutes off the bench or whatever it may be? Embiid is only going to come off the floor maybe 2 minutes every quarter, 3 minutes max, maybe. He'll be on the floor a lot because of the way that TV timeouts work and how many timeouts they all manage it to a point where that their best players are playing a load of the minutes. So like you said, we have the guys that can come off the bench, like Paul Reed for a couple of minutes when need be, DeAnthony Melton, Shake Milton. Like we have those guys that can come in and they've proven throughout the season that they can step up and play, but it all has to come together. And the Sixers have been a team that they've shown time and time again, whether it's been under Brett Brown, with Joel Embiid, with Ben Simmons, with Jimmy Butler, with whoever it may be, they've just not been able to figure it out when it comes time for the playoffs. And I think the clock is running out on the time to do it because with reports of James Harden possibly going to Houston next season and, all these, who's going to occupy that spot next to Embiid? Embiid can't do it all by himself. Like many feel he can, but he just can't. So I think the clock's ticking on how much time Embiid has left and, being able to supply that second superstar to compensate Embiid's production. So this is the year to do it.
Go ahead.
This is the year to do it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's very weird. The Harden reports, we were talking about it a little bit the other day, just off to the side, but I still don't want to believe them, but why are we going to say Shams and Woj's reporting is suddenly inaccurate? That doesn't mean it's a lock that he's going, but the fact that it's even under consideration is very bizarre. Houston is, in my opinion, the most sloppiest team in the league right now. I know Detroit's worse than them, but I'd much rather be Detroit. They're just missing Cade Cunningham. I think they would have been better with him in the lineup. Houston's just seems like they're going nowhere. And for Harden, it's just it would be such a weird move. And I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that's not actually truly under consideration, but if we have enough, a rough playoff exit again, it could happen. So yeah, we are running out of time. We can't keep wasting years. Embiid, this is Embiid's peak. This is the best he's ever been. I think he's in store for a monster playoff run. I think he's overdue for it because the past few years he's gotten unlucky with stuff. So I think he's going to have an awesome playoffs. He will not be the reason we lose in my eyes. So it really just comes down to the coaching, the teammates. They got to step up for him because This is his year. It should be his moment, and everybody else has to help make that happen.
He's never played better. He's never looked better. He's never been healthier. Everything is going as it should be and as it was when we drafted him 8 or 9 seasons ago, whatever it may have been. We saw this coming. We saw this destined to happen, and it's nice to finally see it being put together. And they just need to manage to get through the East. And B needs to show who he is, continue to prove that he's the MVP, and Sixers will win it. So, but they have to have the people, they have to have the players around him to be able to feed off of him and help him do what he does. So if they can't get the entry passes in, or they can't let him isolate, or whatever it may be, set pick and rolls for him, or he's in the pick and roll action, they can't feed him the ball. They're going to have a long day and an early exit in the playoffs.
Embiid's playing awesome. My dream is to see him finish this season with a Finals MVP trophy in his hand. But just to wrap up here before we head out, we also want him to get that regular season MVP at this point. He's been playing amazing. He's leading the league in points per game. He's improved in many marks across the year. It was all leading into this matchup with Denver on Monday. Everyone was hyping it up. Jokic versus Embiid. This could be for the MVP. He winds up, along with Harden, along with a few others, Dan House, missing the game with the injury, just kind of resting. Now, he did play the game before, so people were saying, why did he play in that game instead of this Denver game? And he drew some, weird criticism from people on social media that he was ducking the game, or not even if he was ducking it, but by him missing it, this now, should make him
solidifies the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this? Because I just think I couldn't care less. It's one game. I understand that it was building up to this, like the media, like including me. I'm not going to say I wasn't excited to see Embiid go against Jokic, but just because we didn't get the matchup we wanted, I don't think that suddenly, one game decides what happened in an 82 game season.
Absolutely. Like, just because they go up against each other doesn't mean that decides who gets what trophy, whatever. If we're going to go off stats of who did what against who, Embiid put up 47 and what was it, like 18 rebounds against Jokic?
Yep.
Come on. Like, is that not enough to say? If he's really ducking it, like, why would he be ducking something he probably had his best game of the year on? I mean, come on. So when Perk said, oh, he's ducking it, like, I'm a voter, I'm going to think of this when I'm voting. Yeah. Like, then you really shouldn't have a vote, Perk.
Exactly.
If you don't look at a whole 82 game season and just look at one game that they happen to not play against each other.
Right.
And in the game, with Embiid not even being there, you would think Jokic would pop off for some crazy number. And like, he still had a triple double, but like an underwhelming performance for what Jokic is supposed to be. The MVP, the back-to-back reigning MVP.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to discredit his performances, because he's been a great athlete and he's a top tier player in the league, and he's the second best center behind Joel Embiid.
Exactly.
But
you're right.
it's hard to look at, like, everybody pulls up these higher analytic stats and are like, oh, Jokic is this, he's more efficient passing out. Well, how about let's just look at simple stats like leading the league in points. If a voter would just sit down and watch each play, they have two different skill sets, but it's about who's most valuable to the team. And Embiid is just so valuable, and it's overdue. And I think this year it helps him because of the year he's had. And it's so hard to say, well, he's a back-to-back MVP. Like, what did he do this year that was so different than last year that made him the MVP? Mm-hmm. So that was like that whole LeBron, like, if it was really an MVP award back in 10 years ago, LeBron would be getting it every season. And he didn't, because they didn't want to do that.
Right.
So honestly, it might bode well for Embiid, but I hope that's not the narrative that, like, oh, because he was a back-to-back MVP, Embiid got it. No, Embiid's the better player.
Right. I definitely agree. Like, a few points on that. So one, I think this is Embiid's best season of his career. I think this has to be his year he gets the MVP. This could be his only MVP he ever gets. And I'd be okay with that, because it's very hard to win even one. You look at Durant only has one. Kobe Bryant only had one. One MVP, I'll take that. Like, it's a huge accomplishment. So, but he deserves it because he's been amazing. So I agree with that. I think this is his best season. Jokic missed a game against the Bucks, but no one cared because the Giannis versus Jokic doesn't have the same, connotation that Embiid and Jokic has taken on. But Giannis is still, some people would say, the best player in the league. I said that up until this year because I'm hoping Embiid kind of takes that title for himself in the playoffs, but Giannis is certainly up there. He's already won a championship. So, but no one cares about comparing Giannis and Jokic. So no one mentioned that. Just to mention what you said about Kendrick Perkins, like, I don't really care. He's on ESPN, so he's kind of going to be going for those more hot take kind of stuff, not to take away from people like Stephen A and their jobs because, it's part of the industry. Mm-hmm. But my thing is, like, when you're talking about your vote, though, like, he has a vote. Like, sure, if you want to be entertaining, you want to talk about kind of narratives to drive up the TV ratings. Okay, I have no problem with that. But then when that guy has a vote and he's saying whether he's telling the truth or not, that this is going to impact his vote, when really that makes zero sense whatsoever, that's when I get really upset because you already have guys just like swearing, like you said, that because Jokic has all these analytical advantages that they're going to vote for him. And then when you have someone like Perkins, who's more going for the narratives and then looking at something like this, like, it's one game. We've been the season's like 9 months long. You're going to talk about some random regular season game. That's just where I get frustrated. So yeah, I agree with everything you said. That's all I would want to add there.
And just to touch on that a little bit, like, this is coming off after Perk said Jokic was getting MVP votes because of his race.
Yeah.
Like, now he's going to come out and say, yeah, he's like, so it's very contradictory. And I understand his hot, like you said, the industry is all about having hot takes, but when it comes down to actually having a legitimate vote for a real award, that has money on the line for some players and,
right,
status, whatever it may be. Like, it's very meaningful for players to win the MVP. So, and to say that you're going to judge it off of him missing a game.
Yeah. Especially in this age of the NBA.
This day and age. Exactly.
Like, almost everybody is missing.
He played in this, like, he kind of played in this day and age where it started to become that, like, oh, let's rest a little bit. Like, it was on the back end of his career, but he played in that day and age. He even vouches for LeBron when he sits, like,
right.
Oh, LeBron's old. Like, Embiid's old too. Like, Embiid's been hurt his entire career.
Right. I don't want to get into the load management stuff because that's a whole other topic that can go in a lot of directions. But yeah, I agree that when Embiid, he's going to play, 60, 65 games this year. That's enough for me in this era when most people are around that level. I mean, Luka Doncic, Durant, LeBron, Curry, like, they've all missed time this year. Giannis, even this was the first year Giannis missed a lot of time. I will say Jokic is still one of the few guys who doesn't miss a lot of games. But if Jokic plays 72 games and Embiid plays 64, both teams are really good. Like, that's not enough of a differential for me to
really. If you're comparing games played as your last reason why he shouldn't be the MVP, then
I'll pull up the exact games played now, by the way. It's a lot closer than I thought. Jokic just played 67 and Embiid's got 61. So it's not even a double-digit difference. Like,
6 games.
Yeah, right.
And honestly, it's because Embiid's missed one game this past week.
Yeah.
And there was a couple the week before, or a couple weeks before that, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it's just very little things here and there.
We'll see how it shakes out. I mean, we got, like we said, just to tie it back to how we started this podcast, 2 big games coming up against the Bucks and the Celtics, a few cleanup games after that to wrap up the regular season. But I see no reason that unless Embiid tanks it against these 2 contenders, as long as he comes to play, I think this is his award. I'm sure I'll be talking about it more in the coming weeks on this pod, but yeah, I'm just excited to see how it goes down. So, Jim, before we wrap up, just do you want to put your name to any concrete predictions for how this Sixers season turns out, or do you just want to kind of wait and see what happens?
Joe, I think I'm ready to give some sort of predictions.
All right.
I'll be in attendance on Tuesday, hopefully supporting the Sixers in a win against the Celtics. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that's a win. I think the Sixers are going to have Embiid and Harden back for that game, definitely. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see. I think they'll win that one. And then who knows from there? That they'll already have played Milwaukee by then. Yeah. But I think they beat Milwaukee too. I think they've had Milwaukee at a good shot this year, so we'll see. I think they ride it out hot. They finish with the 2 seed. I think Boston drops down to 3. Milwaukee holds the 1. I think they win first round. I'm not sure they'll get matched up with. That whole four solidified, but that whole 5 through 8 will get adjusted, whoever it may be. And then I could see the Sixers definitely making it to the conference finals. Like we said earlier in the pod, if they can find a way to keep the rhythm of Tyrese Maxey, get Embiid going again, and find a way to have Harden still get his thing while Maxey and Embiid are doing their thing. There's not a team in the NBA that can beat the Sixers then, because they're locked down defensively with Embiid down there. Yes, their guards can be a little bit laxer on the defense, but when you have Joel Embiid protecting the paint, teams got to shoot lights out like the Hawks did 2 seasons ago to beat us. And I don't think any team in the East can do that this year. My prediction as of now, Milwaukee, Philadelphia in the conference finals. I think Philly wins in 6 because they're not going to win it on the road, and they're going to have to win it at home. So I think they'll win. I think they'll win the first 2 in Milwaukee, lose the first one in Philly, win the second one in Philly, and then lose in Milwaukee, come back and win it at home.
Okay.
And then finals matchup, because I probably won't be on for any time till then, but my finals matchup will probably I'll have to say Denver and
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's kind of just like
get it.
I think it's kind of just like in the cards.
Wants.
Yeah, I think it's in the cards. So
yeah.
And that series definitely, whatever happens, whether Embiid pops off and the Sixers lose, or if Jokic pops off and the Nuggets lose, whoever does what better in that series will prove and solidify the debate of who is the better player. And I don't want to hear anything of, oh, Jokic had this many words. No, they faced off against each other on the biggest stage, and who won?
Right. I hope that's what we get. I was talking to Chris the other day, and we kind of went the other way and said maybe the Lakers take the Nuggets down in round 1. But if that doesn't happen, then I would love to see Jokic and Embiid face off in the finals. So I'm glad you have this optimism, Jim, because some other Sixers fans, I understand that the past, so many years of losing in that second round, it can be demoralizing. But I told you this the other day, actually, Jim, like when when the Packers were still in Super Bowl contentions, like you said earlier, like 13-3 every year, one of these years it has to happen. And the thing about the Packers is they actually did win it. I just was so young that I didn't get to really experience it all the way through. The Sixers haven't won it yet, but they could be on the doorstep right now. We're going to have to see how this plays out. But Jim, I'm so excited for this playoff run. I really think
Joe, if this turns out to where the Sixers make the finals and end up losing, I might revoke my fandomship of Philadelphia sports, because that'll be a trifecta of the Eagles Super Bowl.
No, we can't have
Phillies World Series and Sixers finals loss.
Philly sports,
go back.
We have to be cut a break. The Phils are starting tomorrow, so maybe the Phils are also coming for a big season. You got the shirt on right now. Let's go.
I'm ready, Joe. I'm ready.
I'm ready for the Fightins. The Fightins are back. I'm excited. I'm very excited. All right, Jim Hartnett, thank you so much for coming on, filling me with some optimism for this Sixers playoff run. So thank you for coming on, Jim. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening. Make sure to follow Trust the Podcast on Spotify and Apple if you aren't already. Big games coming up. So I'm excited to talk about the end of this Sixers season and playoff run. So thank you guys for listening. Have a great rest of your day. Go Sixers.